I would like to call this meeting to order. Thank you for joining our weekly hybrid MLS breakfast meeting. My name is Cheng, and I am your March program chair. Reminder to please silence your phones. Thank you. Let me introduce our guest speaker today. Paul Cheng is a highly accomplished legal professional with a diverse background and a wealth of experience in the legal field. As a former mediator, deputy city attorney, and prosecutor, he has been at the forefront of conflict resolution and upholding the law, making him an invaluable asset to the community of Arcadia. Beyond his responsibilities as mayor and council member, Paul leads a team of litigation attorneys in Pasadena with a focus on business, real estate, and labor compliance. His firm has been a cornerstone in supporting small to large business operations and facilitating commercial realty transactions. Notably, Paul Cheng is a member of the prestigious the 10 Million Club in Los Angeles, which recognizes exceptional achievements in securing judgments of $10 million or more. As an esteemed public servant, accomplished lawyer, and dedicated community member, Paul Cheng continues to make a lasting impact on the city of Arcadia, fostering a bright and promising future for all its citizens. Now, let's all give a big welcome to our speaker today, Attorney Paul Cheng.
So much. They said that there are people that are online, and so they wanted me to speak up. So today we have a lot to go through in 35 minutes, a lot. And so let's start. We're just going to plug away. We're going to push away. We're going to move forward. I do not represent the city of Arcadia here. I'm not your attorney. Next. If you can see, there are two different groups of laws. Very quickly, criminal law and civil law. In civil law, there are two types of non-criminal types of laws, right? So a civil law is non-criminal. You have torts and contracts. A tort is a non-contract. Why do I share this with you? Why do I share this slide with you? Is because when you go to an attorney, this is the first year of law school. Literally the entire first year of law school is based on this. And so a tort is split into three types. Now today we're going to be focused mainly on contracts, but I just wanted to share with you what's an intentional tort. An intentional tort is a non-contract, right? Because a tort is a non-contract, but it requires intention. So let's say you were in a bar and you got into a fight and someone sues you saying that you hit them, but you're able to prove that you had a stroke and then your arms went out and you hit someone like that. Who would lose? The plaintiff would lose. Why? Because battery requires you to have the intention to hit somebody. What is negligence? Negligence is a duty that society has imposed and you fall below that duty. So if you're in a car and you're in the back and you bump somebody in the front, as long as the person in the front didn't do it fraudulently, the person in the back would lose. Why? Because society has said that if you're in two cars, the person in the back has to be more careful. Does that make sense? And then the last one is strict liability. Whoever has a dog, if your dog goes out and bites somebody, it doesn't matter how cute your dog is, right? You lose. That's strict liability. If it happens, you lose. I share this with you because if you go to a lawyer, this is the way they're thinking. Is this a contract or not a contract? If it's not a contract, I'm thinking, does it require intention? Is it just a societal duty or is it a strict liability? Next slide. So we're going to go over what I've seen during the pandemic as the most common lawsuits that are out there, and we're going to go through it really fast. The first one is can't read English. I see this all the time where people that are sued say they can't read English, and I just want you to know that California law does not support that, type of defense. So if you've signed it, the burden is going to be on you to show that the other side knew that you didn't speak in English and you couldn't read it. So I just want you to know that that's a very common defense. It doesn't work. Now, issue number two, no attorney-client privilege. Why is this very important? Is because nobody seems to want to be honest with their attorney, but everybody wants to be honest with their real estate agent, with their CPA, things like that. Why is that important? Is because you need to articulate to your clients that if you're telling you something that's inappropriate, maybe it's better for them to find an attorney because you are going to need to disclose it. And in fact, I do want you to know that there is real estate agent liability when you know of a defect and you don't disclose it. I've seen that so many times where people purchase property as is, and the real estate agent is held liable. Why? Because the law says both the seller and the real estate agent, even when you sell the property as is, if you know of a defect, it's not easily found, and you've hidden the defect, you are liable, even if you sell as is. Next. No, because we are really, okay, no. Don't worry. Oral promises, I want you to know that oral promises are difficult to prove. I do want you to know in the real estate context, every contract that I've seen in real estate always says that there are no oral promises. Now, you have to be very careful. You have to be very careful because a lot of people don't realize an integration clause, which is the very bottom, which I give as an example, that basically says if there's another contract that's been signed, it cannot contradict the last contract. So if you have that clause, you have to be very careful. Nobody seems to care until the attorneys get involved. Then the attorneys say, which contract was signed the last, right? So just be very careful if you see this type of language, because that basically means one, no oral promises. Stuff on WeChat doesn't matter. Okay. Two, if you've had other contracts before this one, it cannot contradict this one. And some of the clauses basically say, even if there's another contract before this one, it doesn't matter. It's void. So you have to be very careful when you see this. Okay, next. Now, we haven't gotten to 2024 laws yet. So I'm just warming you up for people that are late just to be able to see. And don't worry, these slides are going to be available. So failing to disclose defects, earlier I said it, is that if you know of a defect, you need to disclose it. It does not matter. It does not matter that the other side buys it as is. Now, there's a difference between when the defect is easily found and not easily found, right? The more it is not easily found, the more liability the seller has, right? So I'm not talking about you walk in and the house has no roof, right? That's a defect. Seller forgot to disclose, but the buyer walked in and there was no roof. I'm talking about mold. I'm talking about crazy neighbors, right? That happens, right? People sell their property all the time and they don't disclose that their neighbor has been yelling at them for 2 years, or that there's been pot growing, right? Prostitution homes in the area. These are all things that you have to disclose. All right, next slide. Escrow instructions, I just want you to know, I've seen a lot of cases where the purchase and sale agreement contradicts the escrow instructions. And then the question is, which one controls? So be very careful that your purchase and sale do not contradict your escrow instructions. Now, I understand a lot of people are saying, well, it's not supposed to contradict. Purchase and sale is purchase and sale. Escrow instructions are escrow instructions. But I've seen extensions, right? I've seen extensions on deposit, extensions on purchase and sale, not reflected in the purchase and sale, reflected in the escrow, and both sides begin to fight about that. Next slide. Title insurance, just remember, very easy, right? Very easy. California is smaller than America, so always get America, ALTA, right? ALTA is bigger. America is bigger than California. So if you're going to save, a lot of people want to save a little bit of money. I don't recommend it. Just get ALTA. ALTA is bigger than CLTA. That's all you got to remember. All right. I'm sure Nancy will talk to me about that later. All right, next. Title insurance. Title insurance has a bunch of exclusions, but exclusions occur all the time. So I do need you to be very careful, because if there is something that you are worried about, then you need to tell your title insurance, just like insurance, right? Forget about title. If you're going to purchase insurance and you're worried about something, please make sure you tell your agent, I'm worried about that. Because if it's excluded, and it didn't need to be excluded for another $10 or $20 or $100, right? Why not just pay it? So anytime you're worried about something, make sure you communicate that, because it may be excluded. And these are the typical exclusions that we see. All right, next. Notary powers. I've seen this lawsuits a lot where people are notarizing their documents thinking that it's a court order. In America, a notary is not from the court. And I just want you to know that. But I've seen a lot of lawsuits. Okay, next. Elder abuse. So many of you are starting to specialize in working with people that are over 65. So I understand as real estate agents and professionals, you're looking for unique people to work with that other people have not touched. I just want you to know in the state of California that if you work with somebody over the age of 65 and the person feels that they've been cheated, the rule is a rule of reasonableness, meaning that 12 other jurors would look at you and say, I don't know, it doesn't seem reasonable. And then they could overturn all of your actions and you would be sued for it. So I just want you to know it's not just the 70-year-old man with the 25-year-old girl that's suing for elder abuse. It's actually people that are suing for elder abuse because their real estate agents are encouraging them to sell for under market. And so if they're over 65, you have to be very careful, right? Because I've seen a lot of these lawsuits. All right, next slide. I think I've talked about this several times. Yeah, we don't need to make the agents feel any more horrible than they are. There's so much burden on them already. So issue number 10. Letter of intent. I just want you to know, letter of intent, in the US, the letter of intent. So in Asia and Europe, arbitration is really big. America, arbitration only came up within the last 20 years. Why do I share that? Because letter of intents actually have there's more history in America for letter of intents, but Asian people and Europeans don't quite understand. So why do I share this with you? Because a letter of intent can be binding and non-binding. A non-binding letter of intent is what 99% of society thinks, meaning that you can sign it. If you don't agree, don't worry about it. However, I've seen a lot of agreements that say letter of intent, but it doesn't say whether it's binding or non-binding. And people sue on it based on a contract. And the other side says, oh, letter of intent doesn't mean that it's binding, but there's no law behind that. So you have to be very careful when you see the word letter of intent. It specifically needs to say in your letter of intent, this is non-binding. Because if it doesn't say that, it's a contract. Okay? All right. So this is very important because a lot of times I have to have that sarcasm when I speak to the client. And a lot of people don't quite understand that is that it's a contract unless it says it's not a contract. So just let you know, I think we need to research that issue more. So look into different types of letter of intents. Okay, next. Just very quickly, these are typical contract provision issues that I see people struggling with. Real estate is that attorney fees are always, I've never seen a real estate contract where the losing party does not pay for attorney fees. However, I do want to warn everybody that there are a lot of people, it says that you must engage in good faith mediation. And there are a lot of realtors that don't do that, right? They just sue because an attorney says, you've got a great case. It makes a lot of sense. The problem is if it says that, and you don't engage, write a letter, certified mail, send a text message, you don't get your attorney fees. Because the law basically says that you get your attorney fees in America if a statute gives it to you or a contract gives it to you. If you don't have either, you don't get your attorney fees. In Asia and Europe and Canada, it doesn't matter. If you sue your employer in Canada, you lose, you pay your attorney fees and you pay their attorney fees. In America, it's different. So I just want you to know in America, this is very, very important. Next one is venue. Venue is very important. If you can go back, venue basically means where a case is going to be litigated. Next one is foreign contracts. If you've seen, I've seen purchase and sale in Chinese. That's legal in America. So foreign contracts are okay. Just want to share that with you because a lot of attorneys say that foreign contracts are illegal. That's not true. However, if you have a foreign contract and you bring it to court, it has to be translated. Okay. My recommendation on a foreign contract, if you're dealing with foreign individuals, please write it in a simple language. Because the more complicated a foreign language is, the more errors there are translating it into English. So make it simple Chinese, for example, not complicated Chinese. Who are the parties? I see that a lot. Personal liability of individuals. I see that a lot. Arbitration integration clause. Okay, next. So this is actually not going like I thought. Let's move forward because there's actually 3 parts in 35 minutes. The first part is stuff I've seen during the pandemic. The second part is 2024 laws. And then the last part is going to be what I lectured on last time that everybody wants me to bring back to talk about, which is negotiation, which is very odd, but I'm excited to talk about it. And it was the first time I gave that lecture here and in full. So this one we're just going to skip is how to be a better client to your attorney, because I find that a lot of people are complaining about their attorneys, but I know that you can become a better client. So unfortunately, we just have to move forward. We'll have a different lecture on that. Right? 2024 new laws. All right, 2024 new laws. There's going to be several that I think apply to the real estate industry. Let's move forward. So in summary, this is the 2024 laws that I think are very applicable to our area. I do recommend that you take a picture on it, right? Okay, let's move forward and we'll go over each one. People don't know what a trespass letter is. A trespass letter basically is if you go to your police department and you give them a letter saying your property is abandoned, then the police can be able to eject anybody that's on the premises. You don't have to have an eviction. So a lot of people don't know about that. So it's called a 602 letter. So go to your police department to say, hey, I would like to have a 602 letter, and everybody will know about it. Now, what does this new law do is it extends the time period. So before, property owners every 30 days have to go to the police department and give a new letter. Now it's extended to 12 months. So you just go one time, you give it to your police department, you say, I own this property, anybody on this property, out, right? Because a lot of people were like, why do the police come to my property and not get rid of the homeless? They scoot them away and they come back. Well, the reality is that the police department, they're not attorneys, nor do they give legal advice. And so I'm giving you what I think is going to be able to help you, which is a 602 letter, so that they can be able to eject any unauthorized occupant on your premises. Okay, next slide. Just very quickly, AB 12 is about the security deposit. I do want you to know that, yes, it is limited to 1 month's rent. However, there are exceptions under AB 12 that I'd like you to look at that I've put here. However, I still recommend most property owners still do 1 month, but I'm just letting you know that the law does allow up to 2 months depending on the type of ownership the owner has. Next slide. Just cause evictions. Just cause evictions. So just let you know, the reason why it's going back and forth, it's because we had forgotten the clicker today. So that's my fault. I should have brought one. So just want you to know. In California now, there's 2 ways to look at eviction. One is the old way, and then another one is to look at the new way. So you have to combine the old way and the new way when you look at eviction, okay? The old way is called just cause. Just cause. And just cause basically means you don't pay rent or you breach the agreement. That's just cause. That's just like before. The other way to evict people is based upon no fault. No fault. And the reason why that's important is because attorneys are really learning that as well. So when you speak to an attorney, in the attorney's mind, the attorney's thinking, is this the old way or is this the new way? And what the new way basically is if there's been no breach of the agreement, but you want to get rid of them, there are, I think there was like 13 reasons to get rid of somebody, but I've listed out what I think is the most common. One of them is owner occupy. I'm coming back to the property as the owner, right? Now, I do want you to know that the law has changed. The owner needs to move in 90 days. So before, all the owner has to say is, I'm coming back. Now, they really got to come back. And the law says that they have to live there for 3 years. Now, of course, everybody's going to say, well, how does someone prove that? Well, I can be able to tell you that just like good real estate agents are looking for good cases, there are a lot of good attorneys looking for cases where owner occupy doesn't happen and they sue you. Why? Because they get attorney fees. Okay. The next one is substantial renovation, meaning that there's mold. I'm tearing down a wall. I'm doing all of that. The problem is this: before, you just say that you have to substantially renovate. Now you actually have to provide all of the documents and the permits to the tenant. So before, you just make a claim. Hey, I have to renovate it, right? there's mold, housing issue, et cetera. Now you actually have to prove it, right? So that's new law. The other one's health and safety, right? Like mold and things like that. Don't mean to be repetitive. And the fourth one that I see is government requirements. So the just cause now, the no fault has really changed, right? The way that you evict tenants. But I want to share that with you because a lot of people now are really looking to evict their tenants based upon a no fault. And I just want you to know the law is that you do give 1 month's free rent. And many of the cities, not Arcadia, but for example, LA City, require you to pay specific amounts as well as moving fees. Okay, next slide. Next one, advertising laws. I'm not, this does apply to everybody across the board, but there's just new advertising laws that are in place, right? It's not super hefty, but I just wanted everybody to know. All right, next slide. Basically, in terms of the housing, the advertising laws, basically what it is that if there's any extra fees, you actually have to put it in your advertisement. You have to show people what the fees are, okay? House flipper law, I think this is very applicable to people. In terms of the house flipper law, it basically says that if you own property, in summary, if you own property and you sell it within 18 months, you're a house flipper, okay? And in terms of being a house flipper, you need to disclose to the buyer room additions, modifications, alterations, repairs, any contractor work, all of that, you have to give it to the buyer. Does that make any sense? Okay, because some people either are looking at me in shock or I didn't make any sense. So if you're considered a house flipper, so a flipper is a residential 1 to 4 property, okay? That's considered, that's the first bucket. The second bucket is you buy and sell in 18 months. That's the second bucket. If you have both of those buckets, the third bucket is that you need to give the buyer all the things that you've done on the property, everything. Now, there are exceptions, but I don't think that many of us can fall into the exceptions that easily. I would rather us just comply with the law. You have to tell them, I changed the room. Here's the contractor. I did the paint, the electricity socket I changed. I put in a new oven, stuff like that. Okay, next. ADU. Now, this one, I want you to know that the reason why I'm hesitating on this is because I read it, but because I'm in the city of Arcadia, I'm hesitating on making a decision on what this means. I think what it means is not that every property ADU can now be sold, right? I believe what the law is that every city can make that ADU into a separate unit to be sold. So the reason why I'm sharing that with you is there's a lot of rumors. Everybody's like, oh, every ADU now can be sold. If there's an ADU, I can sell it. No, that's not what I think. I think what the law says is it allows local government to make an ADU a separate unit to be sold. And so what you need to do is you need to go to your local city and you need to find out if they have this on the books. And the reason why is because in the city of Arcadia, we haven't addressed this issue. Right? So if someone were to sell their property in Arcadia, their ADU, I don't think that's legal. That's why I take that position. But I understand that there are a lot of attorneys that now say every ADU can now be sold. Okay, next slide, if there is one. Oh, general plan. Okay, so just let you know, general plan, this very controversial. Every 8 years, there's something called a general plan. So the city does, we're gonna make that area here into commercial. Right now it's farmland, okay? But during the 8 years, what does the city do? They slowly rezone. Do you understand what I'm saying? What this says is if the city has a general plan that says commercial, but they don't rezone it, this says that the general plan controls. So this is totally changing everything because maybe during the 8 years, the city felt that this was important, but not so important. Right? Like maybe they were like, okay, we're going to do commercial, but we're going to do it in phases. Well, this law basically says that the general plan controls. So you can go to the city and you say, hey, you didn't zone it, right? For commercial, I'm building commercial. City says no. And you say, what does your general plan say? Does that make sense? Because before, cities had so many requirements, like so much rezoning, and you were like, oh, God, I can't figure it out. So what Sacramento basically said is every 8 years, you just do a big plan, commercial, residential, single family. That's what controls now. And a lot of cities are fighting against that, right? Because a lot of cities are saying, yeah, we had a general intent, but we should be able to decide when we want to do it, and we should be able to decide not to do it. But under this one, it's very controversial that just passed because every city now is saying, hey, wait a minute. And every developer is saying, general plan, great, we wanted this forever. Okay, so how much more time do I have? All right, guys. So I wanted you to know a couple of weeks ago, I shared about something called negotiations. And I shared it from a standpoint of my experience based upon being in city council, as well as just negotiating in general. And I'm going to give some tips to you because I think it's going to help you become a better person and a better negotiator. So here's tip number one. The right mindset is the key. When you are going to negotiate, it's not about positions. So I'm going to say that again. Negotiation is not about positions. It's about information. So I'm a huge reader of FBI negotiations. When the FBI goes in and they negotiate with people, they're not about positions. Why? Because you can't go in with 4 hostages and come out with 2 and make it successful. You have to come out with all 4. It's all about information, right? So in the movies, they always say, keep that guy on the phone, keep that guy on the phone, right? What is that? That guy want pizza? Does he want coffee? Why are they doing that? Because they're looking for information. So the first tip, increase the pool of knowledge. Get as much information as you can. That is goal. That is your big goal. Your goal is not your position. Okay? Okay. Let me give you another example. Have you ever gone to an elected official, right? Somebody running for office? What's the worst question that you can ask that person? I'm going to answer it for you because we don't have time. Why are you running for office? Right? And then they go off for 15 minutes and you're like, oh my God, why did I ask that stupid question? I was just trying to be nice. Am I right? Right. And so the other person that's running for office, what they should have done, right, is just get to know you. Because the goal really to vote for them, all you really like, you don't know them. You just want to see if they're a nice person. But because a person's so nervous, they just begin to talk. And then the next thing you know, you're like, oh my God, I would never vote for this person anyway, right? That is an example, right, of getting information. All that person running for office has to do is, where do you live? Tell me about yourself, right? And then you just talk, right? And at the end, you're like, boy, that person was really great. And that person didn't even ask you to vote for them, right? That's what you're doing as you are trying to increase the pool of knowledge. The right mindset is the key. Okay, second tip, silence your mind. Silence your mind. Here's the problem. When you go into a negotiation, your mind is screaming. Rah! The other person's mind is also screaming. Rah! So you actually have 4 people in the negotiation, not 2, 4. So you need to reduce the people in the room as fast as you can by silencing your mind. Because if your goal is to get information from the other side, then the more you talk, the less you can hear. And here is the problem, the next slide, is that the person on the left thinks they're making sense. The person on the right can't understand. And then the problem is, if you keep on going, this is the typical negotiation. Both sides not understanding each other, right? So you need to silence your mind. Silence your mind. So when I'm in court and the judge is like staring at me, totally mean to me, right? All I'm thinking about is, what is the judge saying? That's all I'm thinking about. I'm not thinking about my arguments. I'm just looking at the judge and I'm zoning in on the judge. And that's what you have to do in negotiations as well. Silence your mind. Next. Okay. You have to accept, next slide, it's okay. Equal principles require you not to dismiss the principles. Why is that important? If you walk into a negotiation and you think the other side is stupid, That is the most horrible thing you can do. The best thing that you can be able to do is to think that the other side is right, just like you. If you do that, you will treat the person with respect. So here's an example that I give. How many of you guys dislike RVs? You're like, oh my God, the RVs, they're all over the place. Huh? How many of you guys like dislike RVs? You're like, oh my God, RVs are all over the place. They're parked here, parked here, parked here, parked here. All of you are nodding, but all of you are scared, right? Okay, that's fine. The flip side of that is how many of you believe in property rights and personal property rights? The reason why I share that with you is if you believe that the person on the other side has every right to believe what they believe, and they could be 100% right, you will treat them with respect. So here's the next slide. Keep on going. Go back. The overtime of the Super Bowl impacts the last episode of Seinfeld, right? Overtime on the Super Bowl, last episode of Seinfeld, but on the same channel. Both of them are incredible. Both of them are incredible. That's the way you need to look when the other side begins to yell at you and states their position. You need to be able to say, that makes sense. If you do that, you'll be a better negotiator, right? Next slide. Slow it down. So how do I slow conversations down? I repeat the last 2 to 3 words of the person that spoke. That's how I slow it down, right? So if a person comes to me, earlier there was a person came to me, all he loved was shoes, right? That guy, Sacco. And what did he say to me? He paid off his house in 23 years. He went to Israel in 1960. The tattoo on his right arm is about the Holy Spirit and all of that. In 7 years, his younger brother was cured of illness, death illness, right? And I don't know if the price is right, but he always says that regular shoes like mine are $12. So, all right. Now, why do I share that with you? I share that with you because every time he spoke, I just repeated the last 2 or 3 words, and I was able to get all that information in 5 minutes, 7 minutes. So to slow it down, because you have to realize your mind is so fast. You have to silence your mind. You have to zone in on the other person, and you got to slow the conversation down, kind of like the Matrix. When the bullets are flying, you just slow it down. The way you slow it down is by repeating the last 2 to 3 words of what the person is saying. That's it. That's it. That's about negotiations. Next slide. In my opinion, what you need to do is you need to do what's called an accusation audit by basically saying all the bad things about you. You write them all down way in advance so that when someone says that about you, you don't overreact. And your brain doesn't start screaming, right? Because if you've already dealt with it and you're silencing your brain, when the other person says, you're terrible, you're a fraud, you've already thought about it. You're not screaming about it. You're calm about it. So it's called an accusation audit. And we're only halfway there, but we're 7 minutes away. Okay, let's keep on moving. I do what's called a tent of safety with an accusation audit. And what does that mean? Is that I take all the bad things that somebody's going to say about me, all the negative positions, and I do what's called ABC. So we're going to do ABC. It's called I approach by acknowledging, agreeing, admitting, and apologizing. That's A. Then I do B. I build the bridge together and I compromise. So I do not state my position first. So what I'll do is I'll say, thank you very much for sharing. I agree with you. That's the first thing that you have to do with somebody that hates you. I agree with you. I agree that we have to make our city better. Thank you for sharing that. I admit that there's a lot of frustration that I see, right? It's obvious that you're frustrated. And I want to apologize when it doesn't look like I care. I mean, think about that. Somebody that you dislike says that to you. Would you be soft? Immediately you would change. Why? Because the other person is creating a tent of safety. B is building the bridge together, right? Although we disagree, can we look at this together? That's all you got to say. Can we just look at this together? And then C is then you provide the solution. That's A, B, C. Okay, next. Don't worry about the example. All right. No, no. In my opinion, no is awesome. You know why? Because in society, no. How many of you, when you go to a store, right, and the person like walking around and you're walking around, the person's, hi, can I help you? Can I help you? Hey, can I help you? Right? What do you say? No, thank you. I'm just looking, right? But when you say, no, thank you, I'm just looking, right? Do you feel bad that the other person walks away? You feel great. You feel so much power when you do that, right? You feel so good because you can't say no to anybody else except the person who wants to sell you something. I share that with you because one of the things in negotiation is you have to make the other person feel safe and in control. And them saying no is not their way of hating you. Them saying no is their way of exerting safety and control. And that's great because a lot of times we can't figure out what the other person's thinking. So saying no is not bad. Do not be discouraged, right? Do you think that the FBI negotiator, when he goes into a room, he's like, hey, you know, I really need these 4 hostages back. And they're like, no. And then the FBI negotiator's like, right? He's not going to do that. That's great, right? No is just as important as yes. Next. Focus on the and question. Whenever somebody is negotiating, I always say this, what is it that you want? And what is it that you don't want? And if you add them together, are you going to act the same way? Because most people only focus on what they want. But you, as the smart negotiator, must focus on what you want and don't want. And you think, are you going to respond that way? So when the person says, you're an idiot, you should just slow down the conversation and ask yourself, what do I want? I want to win. What do I don't want? I don't want the person to walk away. And your reaction is not going to be, I'm an idiot, you're an idiot. Do you understand what I'm saying? Focus on what you want and what you don't want. And ask yourself, should you act that way? Next slide. We're almost done. Be careful. Okay. Be careful when it's unsafe. If somebody's, okay, what is safe? We're joking around. Okay, let me tell you what happened earlier. It's okay. Somebody came up to me. They're like, oh my God, you've been lecturing here for so long. It's so great. I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh my God, you know, you're getting older and we're all joining together. And I was like, great. And the person said to me, you look like you got fat. That changed the dynamic. You have to be sensitive when you are negotiating, when it becomes unsafe. Now, how do you know when things become unsafe? I call it silence or violence. Silence means a person shuts down, boom. Or they begin to become sarcastic and withdraw. You need to know it's no longer safe. You have to know you can't say whatever it is that's coming out of your mind. Violence. Violence is another way that people, when they get upset, that's what they do. Violence is when you begin to control other people. So if you see silence or violence, you need to know the room is now unsafe. And you need to silence your mind, focus on the other side, repeat the last 2 to 3 words that they said. Make them feel safe. That is the biggest thing because the room is no longer safe. Okay, next slide. 3 types of people. I've said this before. We'll go over real fast. Ants, bulls, and butterflies. We got to push through this. Ants are data-driven. Ants are data-driven. Bulls are bulls. We have to, bulls are bulls. There you go. Butterflies are people driven by relationships. Now, why do I share this with you? Why do I share this with you? We're going to go over them very, very fast. Can you give me another 5 minutes? People are yawning. Is 5 minutes cool? Are you guys cool? All right, all right. All right, so 5 more minutes. Keep on pushing. Yeah. Ants are usually methodical people. Everybody wants to be an ant. The reality is they are not. Ants are usually well prepared, but they seem cold and distant. In fact, many people feel that they're not people. They're just kind of weird, right? They work in the midst of chaos, right? A bull, getting a job done is more important than feelings, period. All I care about is the decision. A butterfly, they're connected with the process of relationships. I just love being next to you. Give me a hug, right? All right, next slide. What's an ant? An ant is someone that is methodical, diligent, and calculated in a good way. They're usually cold or weird. They are decisive regardless of what others say to them. So you can tell an ant anything, all they care about is the data that they researched. That's all they care about. They actually don't respect other people. They don't say it like a bull. A bull will say it. An ant won't. They just only respect themselves because they're data driven. Next slide. What's a bull? A bull is getting a job done. They cut off people during discussions. They do not get easily offended, or they do, but they don't understand why other people are offended by them, right? They are passionate in their speech. They double down on statements that are untrue. They just make statements that are untrue. They're okay with that. And they will say harsh words to make their point known. That's a bull. Next, butterfly. Butterflies are connected with people. Time is not money. Time is relationship building, right? You know the person that calls you and they spend 10 minutes on the phone? You're like, oh my God, should I answer that? That's a butterfly, right? Butterflies are easily depressed, discouraged, or hurt by others. They frequently are worried about hurting other people, right? And it's really hard to tell how they really feel. Why? Because all they care about is you, right? But I'm going to tell you why that's a problem. So let's move forward. How do you communicate with an ant? You need to be overly prepared when you speak to them. You need to, because they respect others that come prepared. If you're not prepared, don't speak to an ant, right? Because if you aren't prepared, don't speak with them because they think that's a sign of disrespect. Don't be afraid if they're quiet. Being quiet with an ant is their way of thinking because they feel if they say something, they mean it because it comes from their data. Do not make a promise to an ant if you're not going to do it. Why? Because they will remember it forever. Because that is their data point in their life. It could be 4 years earlier. And they're like, I just don't trust you. Right? So just be careful. All right, bull. If you work with the bull, this is my recommendation, is that you don't hit them hard. I understand people feel bull should hit back with another bull. No, that's not true. A bull only cares about one thing, control. So the questions that you ask them and inquire about needs to allow them to make the decision, not you. Once they make the decision, right, that is different because a bull's going to run this way, then run this way, and then run this way. They don't care that they're contradicting themselves. All they care about is wanting control. So if you're able to allow control to be with the bull, once they go this way and you want them to go this way and they come back, they will just punch everybody along the way and you won, right? Because they made the decision, not you. Next slide. Butterfly. My recommendation with the butterfly, be very positive. However, when you talk to a butterfly, you need to ask them between 3 to 5 times, when they say yes, do they mean yes? Because a butterfly is so worried about hurting you, they will say yes to anything. So you need to give them an opportunity to say no. Because what's going to end up happening is if you're trying to get a deal done and they say, I agree, 5 minutes later, they're going to come up with a reason why they can't do it. So you need to ask them 3 to 5 times, Hey, it's okay to say no. Are you sure? Wait, next Tuesday, we're going to hang out, right? Give them a text message an hour later, 2 hours later, same day. You'll find that butterflies have many, many, many excuses for not getting stuff done. All right. Next slide. We're almost done. 4 steps to work with other people. 1, you need to recognize who you are. 2, you have a 2 in 3 chance that the other side is not you. You may be an ant. You have 2 out of 3 chances the other side is not an ant. They may be a bull, right? 3, you need to begin to speak from their standpoint, not yours. And 4, learn to communicate from their position, not yours. Okay, next slide. So just let you know, we're almost done. Tip number 10 is called the path of the mind. And what the path of the mind is once you begin realizing that the expression that people have at the very end is not really what they're thinking. Because look, the top is a person hears something, sees something, or is told something. Immediately there's a story, right? How many of you guys like, hey, did you hear? Sarah has a new relationship outside, right? Right? Somebody says that, 八卦, right? They're like, hey, right? What ends up happening? You immediately have a story in your head, don't you? Right? I knew that Sarah, man. She was always looking at that guy. That's a story. No. The scariest story, though, is when there's a reaction called FUD. It's called fear, uncertainty, and doubt. When there is fear, uncertainty, and doubt, that really creates a story in someone's heart or soul. And then what do they do with their story? They don't investigate the story. They justify the story, right? This is very important because the other person's not there, right? So somebody comes up to you and says, hey, Sarah was flirting with your husband, right? For example, it immediately creates FUD. Your immediate story is, I knew that Sarah, always doing that, right? And then you create the justification. Boom, you send out the text message. Why? The justification is, can't touch my man, right? And then there's the expression, which is, F you, I knew you were like that. I knew you were like that, right? Now, why do I give this really extreme story that's not making any sense? Because when other people overly react to you and they treat you improperly and you're like, whoa, what happened? I don't understand. They've gone through this. So you need to slow it down. It's okay. They've gone through some craziness, right? Their expression has nothing to do with anything else. Okay. Other tips, we're going to close out. We love dogs because they wag their tails. You as a human being must be genuinely interested in other people, right? I know that sounds bad, but how many times have you looked at a dog when they look into your eyes, right? And they're trying to communicate with you? Nobody's dog has ever talked to them, but everybody has thought their dog has talked to them. That's how you need to be if you're a negotiator. Second, a person's name is the sweetest sound. Never forget their name. Now, I'm not asking you to be like Paul. No. But just don't forget people's names in a negotiation. If names were not important, why do people pay millions of dollars to name buildings after their name? 3, when you look at a photo, whose face do you look at first if your face is in the photo? Yourself. So stop thinking about yourself and start thinking about the other person. The person doesn't care about you in a negotiation. All they care about is themselves. Distrust your first reaction. Praise before you provide a critical point. Always tell them how great they are. My recommendation is always talk about errors in your own life before to try to connect with the other side. Especially if you're saying the other side is making the same mistake you made. You might as well share about your own life. Lastly, if you are a winner, never acknowledge it to the other side. Always tell the other side that they did better than you, right? Always. If you got a great deal, you got to say, I hope we never negotiate again, man. You took everything I had, right? All right. Last slide. So this one here, I just wanted to share very quickly. This is outside the state capitol. This is a statue of the Sisters of Mercy. If you look at the very right side, so this is 1857. If you look at the very right side, do you see that nun that's holding somebody? That's actually a Chinese orphan. Now, why do I share that with you? I share that with you because in 2024, all we care about seems to be what divides us. And I want you to know that from the beginning of California, we were all Californians. And from the beginning of California, races all loved each other. I want to remind you in 2024 that the elections are going to occur, but I want to remind you during COVID, President Biden and President Trump did not knock on your door. Your neighbor knocked on your door to make sure that they had toilet paper, to make sure that you were okay, to make sure that you were alive. And I want to remind us that we're going to take back this country. Why? Not because of the president, but because of the fact that we're neighbors first. Now, the very, very last thing I wanted to share with you is this. I'm in a room of success. I worry that there's a few people that are holding on by their last thread. And I want to say this to you. For every teardrop, for every sleepless night, for every betrayal, for every sacrifice, I want you to know that you are not an accident. I want you to know that your best days are coming. And I want you to know that it's not an error that you are here today. I want to promise you this, that in 1 year, we're going to shake hands and you're going to tell me that the pivot that occurred today, for whatever reason, is the pivot that allowed you to survive. Your best days are coming and America's best days are coming because of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Join us next week as we welcome CoStar to present a topic of 2024 commercial real estate trends and the forecast. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining our meeting today. Have a wonderful day. The meeting is now adjourned.